Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to my first book haul of 2020. These are going to be all the books that I acquired at the end of 2019, so some stuff I got for Christmas, some stuff I got from friends and publishers as well, and also some stuff I bought for myself. So let's jump into what I hauled because there is a large stack. I'm not really going to go in any particular order, so the first book that I have here is Malice by John Gwynne. If you've been on my channel for a while, you would know that I started this last year on audiobook when I was traveling around Japan and I ended up DNFing it then. And I only know from that brief reading of it and from hearing other people talk about it that this is a high adult fantasy. It's multiple perspective and it includes a war with giants, I believe. And I thought after DNFing the audiobook that I would try reading it physically. So my friend Alex was kind enough to gift these to me because she was getting rid of them. So I actually don't just have Malice, I have the rest of the series. And that includes Valor, Ruin, and Wrath. I'm only trying to keep Malice as a priority for these because I don't want to add this whole series to my reading pile. I'd rather just read Malice and see if I like the rest of the series. So as far as my to be read pile is concerned, I'm only technically adding one unread book because I want to see how I go. I'm trying to be optimistic, but I don't know if I'm going to love it if I didn't connect with the audiobook. So I'm hoping that there's going to be no disconnect here because first of all, these covers are stunning. And second of all, it's in a genre that I pretty much read the most, which is adult fantasy. Next, I have a cute little comic and it's Strange Planet. And this has been on the internet for, it feels like ages. There are always these cute comic strips with this artist and they've all been put into a book. So it's got old and new comics in here, and Hachette, the publisher, were kind enough to send this on my way. So I am going to delve into this and flip through and hopefully have a laugh because a lot of these comics that I've seen online I've really enjoyed. So I anticipate that I'm going to really enjoy this one as well. Next, we have a few things that I bought myself for Christmas. So the first one is Prince of Thorns by Mark Lawrence, and this is, I think it's more of a dark fantasy because it's got an anti-hero in it, and I actually have read this one already, but I listened to it on audiobook, and the way it's written, it alternates timelines and it doesn't tell you explicitly which timeline you're in, but it's apparently easier to understand if you've read the physical book, and I think I missed a lot when I listened to the audiobook. So I want to try rereading it as a physical book and see what my thoughts are because I gave it a 4, and if I missed a ton of stuff, I can probably give it a 5. So I'm hoping that this is going to be more than a 4-star read for me when I eventually read it in the future because I want to reread it in early 2020. So we'll see how I go with that. This follows Jorg, who is the leader of a band of outlaws, and I don't want to say too much about who he is and what he's up to because it really is intriguing to find it out for yourself, and he's a character that is not heroic good at all. So he does a lot of things that are really questionable, but if you read the book and you understand his perspective, then you can kind of go, oh, I don't really like what you're doing, but it's really cool for the story and I understand what you're going for. So he's a character that you might not necessarily want to get behind, but he's a character that's really deep and interesting, and I really want to revisit this and reignite my love for the series because I also got the second book, King of Thorns, and Dave has actually read this entire trilogy and he wanted it physically, so I ended up buying the first 2 because we have the third one and he listened to the audiobooks for the first couple and then physically read the other. So he wants me to read this series as well so he can talk with me about it because it is one of his favourites, and it's just a very uniquely done fantasy compared to what we're used to seeing, which is more of a morality and a heroic good. That is not this series at all, and I'm looking forward to how it blends a dark dystopian futuristic fantasy novel with a little bit of maybe sci-fi in it as well, and I like that mix, and I think Mark Lawrence did it really well in book 1. So again, looking forward to Prince of Thorns and King of Thorns, and then eventually Emperor of Thorns, which is book 3. The next one that I got myself for Christmas is the first Wheel of Time book. So this is a very long book, but a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, and again, I don't know a lot about the Wheel of Time. Eye of the World I know is book 1 because it says on the spine, but I believe it follows a main character and a bunch of other perspective characters, but this main character that I talked about, I don't know his name, but he is either the chosen one or not because the powers in this world favor the women, and apparently if the men use them then they deteriorate or something. Again, I'm really not a great authority on this series. I want to read it this year and hopefully love it because this is a very long series, but I know that Brandon Sanderson finished off the last few books, and that's what draws me to this, the fact that even though the author passed away, it was written and concluded in a way that's very true to the series. So I'm looking forward to starting these because they're going to be so full of depth and so full of story, and this series is so raved about by the fans of it, and it just seems to be everywhere in the fantasy community, so I really need to read it if I'm a fantasy fan to see what all the fuss is about. Next, we have a book that Scholastic kindly sent to me, and I will have a review going up for this month, I believe, and it's Call Down the Hawk by Maggie Stiefvater, and this is technically the 5th book in her already established Raven Cycle world, but it's a separate series to that. So it follows Ronan, who is one of the characters in that saga, and he is kind of college age now. They've graduated high school, and I don't want to talk too much about what happens because obviously it's technically the 5th in a series, and if I talk about plot stuff too much then it will spoil you, but it deals with dreaming and pulling things out of dreams, which is really cool, and dream hunters as well, trying to stop a pending apocalypse. So it was very interesting, it was very character deep and character focused, and the writing is very whimsical, and I really liked that about it. So if you like that kind of writing that's lyrical and whimsical, then you're going to really like the Raven Cycle, and I would really recommend reading the Raven Cycle Quartet before you start this one, because it'll give you some really necessary background understanding the world and the characters before you dive into this one. But I ended up really liking this one, and I'm really just happy that Scholastic sent it to me. Next, I bought this one myself, and it is Tunnel of Bones by Victoria Schwab, and this is the 2nd book in her middle grade series. So the 1st book is City of Ghosts, and it's about this girl named Cass, and she had a near-death experience where she fell off a bridge and into a lake, and this boy named Jacob rescued her and pulled her back from the veil. So because she had this, technically I say near-death experience, but technically she did cross over and then come back. So because she did that, now she can see ghosts and cross over into the veil at will, and it really follows her when her parents are also filming a show for ghost hunting, and one of them is an avid believer and one isn't, and neither of them know that Cass can actually see ghosts and interact with them, and that her best friend is a ghost. So it follows the family as they go to the Tunnel of Bones in Paris, and Cass kind of stumbles onto the fact that there may be a poltergeist, and she doesn't want to let it wreak havoc. She wants to do something about it because she's the only one who really can do something about it. So that's what this book follows, and I really enjoyed it. So obviously I'm going to be continuing on with this series, but it's a beautiful middle grade series. If you haven't read it yet, please do. They're really quick, really digestible, and also the covers are really beautiful. So really happy I bought this one. Next is a book that I talked about in a recent reading wrap up, and there's also another video going up shortly that is going to detail this book as well, but it is The Burning White by Brent Weeks, and this is the last book in his Lightbringer series. The first book is The Black Prism, and this is again another adult fantasy series, pretty much what I'm known for reading, to be honest. This has been one of my absolute favourite books of 2019, and it's because of the intricacies of the magic and the plot and the characterization and just the betrayals and the political intrigue in here was just the best. I'm slowly collecting this series because I listen to them all on audiobook and I really want to own them physically. Next is a book that I received for a Christmas gift, and it is Normal People by Sally Rooney, and this is a book that I wouldn't have picked up on my own because I think it's more of a contemporary / literary fiction, but I am keen to start it anyway because I like having a bit of a palate cleanser when I'm reading a ton of fantasy. It's nice to just break that cycle a little bit and deviate into contemporary. It just looks like it follows these two characters, and then it says, but when the two strike up a conversation, awkward but electrifying, something life-changing begins. So I think it's just a foray into these people's lives and how they're supposed to be normal people, but they're probably odd and awkward and strange. And it seems to be about friendship and love and fascination, and I don't know, it just seems like a good time. So if I get back in time for Contemporaryathon, because I don't know what the dates are, they haven't been announced yet, and I am going away to Japan at the end of January and early Feb. So if I'm back and ready to participate in Contemporaryathon, this is probably going to be one of the things that I put on my TBR for it. Next is a book that Penguin Teen kindly sent to me, and it is A River of Royal Blood, and this is by Amanda Joy, and I believe it's a young adult fantasy. Maybe it's about siblings? No, it is not about siblings. It says 16-year-old Ava is a princess born with the magic of blood and marrow, a dark and terrible magic that hasn't been seen for generations in the vibrant but fractured country of Maya. Oh no, it is about sisters. So it says, living in Raina's long and dark shadow, Ava must now face her older sister Isa on her 17th name day in a battle to the death if she hopes to ascend to the ivory throne, because in the queendom of Maya only the strongest, most ruthless leader survives. So it is about sisters. It's about sisters fighting to the death. This is like the anti-Frozen. I haven't seen any negative reviews of this. I've seen a few people talk about it very briefly. It's not like it's a hyped up young adult release, but it's definitely on my radar because I follow this author on Twitter. So I'm really happy that Penguin Teen sent it to me. I'm excited to see what I think about this because I'll probably read the first few pages, and whether it is for me or not, I will continue reading it because I tend to read young adult fantasy and have it a bit hit and miss. So I want this to be a hit hit, so I'll try it and see how I go. And then I have another book that was gifted to me by a publisher. I don't actually know which one, but it was in our goodie bags when we went to a young adult showcase in December. So a young adult showcase is where all of the Aussie publishers get together and do a brief presentation of the key titles that they're excited about for 2020. So in our goodie bags, we got All That Impossible Space, and I believe this is, I don't know if it's a finished copy. I think it's a finished copy, yeah. And I think it's a mystery as well, which is what I don't usually read. But it says, how do you solve a 70-year-old mystery when you can't even figure out your own life? I don't need to know any more than that, to be honest. I don't read mystery or thriller very much at all, unless it's an element incorporated into one of the fantasy books that I read. So again, this might pop up on my Contemporaryathon TBR, but I'm not really fussed to get to this one because, again, it's not usually my genre, so if I don't get to it, I don't get to it. But if I do and I enjoy it, then that's a bonus. I will also mention another book that I received from Simon & Schuster, the publisher. So I didn't ask for this, it came as a complete surprise, and it was actually like a summer gift to me because they included some sunscreen and they included this cool little cocktail list. So there's like 3 summery cocktails on here to make, and it also has a sticker on the front of the book with a summer suggestion as well. And it's called Mr. Nobody, and this is, I believe, a Sharp Objects meets Before I Go to Sleep in this gripping psychological thriller from the author of Something in the Water. I am not familiar with thrillers or anything, so those titles are only vaguely familiar to me. Obviously, I know Gillian Flynn wrote Sharp Objects, but apart from that, no idea. And it also says he wants to remember and she needs to forget. So it seems like a back and forth. Maybe it's a cat and mouse, maybe it's a murder mystery. Again, really not sure, but I'm looking forward to trying and seeing what I think about it because I'm always keen to try a thriller, but when I go to that section in the bookstore, it's always overrun with books and all of them look the same. I guess like someone coming to fantasy, they wouldn't know what to choose. So that's kind of like me with this mystery thriller section. So now that I've got one that's been cherry picked for me and this comes out in February, I'm looking forward to seeing whether I like it or not. Okay, now back into some more fantasy. So I have Starsight by Brandon Sanderson. I have the paperback, which I ended up buying for myself because the hardcover was taking too long. And I have a hardcover that I pre-ordered from Waterstones because this is a signed copy. And you know me and my Brandon Sanderson, he's my favorite author and I love collecting multiple editions. So even though I didn't adore Starsight as much as I did with Skyward, I still really thoroughly loved it and I can't wait for his continuations of it, and I'm super excited for anything else he writes because I know Stormlight 4 is coming out this year and I'm so excited. But anyway, I got Starsight. This came out at the end of November, I think, so I got it probably around the time it released. I can't remember now, but I read it pretty much straight away even though I was working full-time and quite busy. So again, 2 copies of this, paperback and a hardcover. No regrets. Next is a book that I got gifted for Christmas and I am super excited about this one, and it is A Little Hatred by Joe Abercrombie, and I asked my parents for this for Christmas and I only expected them to get me the paperback, but they pre-ordered me the hardcover and look at these end papers. This is such a gorgeous cover. Oh, I've been spoiled and I love it. I have been reading Joe Abercrombie throughout 2019 and I finally caught up with all of his books in the First Law World, and that is a trilogy that he wrote. It's actually up here on the shelf behind me. So he wrote that trilogy and then he wrote a bunch of other books set in the same world. So it followed characters that had interacted like 14 years along. So from the blade itself to the book on the screen, that's like 14 years of time that has gone past, and then this is set in the future. So they've started making machinery and metalworks and gunpowder and that kind of thing. It's like an industrial revolution basically in the same world of Ardua, which is where the other stories are set. And I didn't want to start this one before finishing the others because some of the names I read in the blurb after I'd finished all of the series, they were characters and offspring of characters that we'd met in the past, and so I didn't want to spoil myself by reading this one first. And I already have this audiobook. I've preempted getting this so that I can listen to it on audiobook, and I really wanted to collect it physically as well, which is why I have this copy here. Next up, I was a bit naughty and I got 2 books at a book sale, and I have been so good for the entirety of 2019 not buying books willy-nilly, but I kind of crumbled at the end, mostly because I saw this manga and it's Full Metal Alchemist, and this is volumes 13 to 15, And this is a series that I have started both the anime and the manga for, but I never ended up finishing. And it's so incredible. It's about two brothers and they end up losing their mother when they're very young, and both of them are alchemists. So they try and set up some alchemy to do a spell and bring her back, but she comes back broken, and because of this, the alchemy requires an equivalent exchange for what they have tried to bring back. So the younger brother, Al, he loses his entire body, and then Ed loses an arm and a leg, and in his grief and this pain, Ed manages to bind his brother's soul to a close by suit of armor. So now both of these brothers are trying to track down the Philosopher's Stone so that they can restore their bodies to what they used to be before they did this spell as children. And it's a military fantasy because there is a military in here. It deals with alchemists and almost X-Men-like powers, but there's always a very hard magic system when it comes to alchemy and understanding the rules of equivalent exchange, and that's what I really like about this series. And it also really deals with brothers and friendship and grief and identity, and it's such a good series. So that is why I could not resist when I saw this for like $10, because usually these are like $26 each. This is a bind up of 3, so for that price I was like, yes, you're coming home with me. And then in the same book sale, I got a Robin Hobb book, and it is The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince. I actually have never read this series despite reading and loving all of Robin Hobb's Elderlings books, and this is like a fairy tale or story that is mentioned in the series. So you don't have to read the series to understand this little book because it's technically a prequel, so it won't matter what order you read it in. I probably shouldn't have bought this, but it had a really pretty cover that matches my other Hobb editions, and it was only like $5, so... Oh yeah, before I forgot to mention, because it got buried in my stack of books, but when I was at the Young Adult Showcase, I also got a sampler for Havenfall, which is by Sara Holland. She wrote the Everless books. I think it's a trilogy, maybe it's a duology, but they've got a striking red and white cover with like an hourglass on it. This is a young adult fantasy. It is a sampler. I don't know if it's going to be any good. I'm a bit iffy when it comes to young adult fantasy, like I've said, but it says, Maddie spends her summers working at her uncle's in Havenfall. For generations, this rundown country manor has secretly served as a neutral territory linking magical realms, which sounds just awesome, to be honest. So if I like this, I might consider getting the actual book when it comes out, because I don't know when it comes out. It doesn't explicitly say. Oh, it comes out on the 3rd of March in 2020. Okay, so we're getting to the end. I have 3 books left. So the next one is Kings of the Wild, which I was kindly gifted by my friend Ayla for Christmas. So thank you, Ayla. This has been on my wish list for a little while, and honestly, the cover is just absolutely beautiful. I really love this kind of watercolor illustrated cover. It's better than just like guy with sword, even though technically it's a bunch of guys with swords, but you get my meaning. It's pretty, it's drawn, it's illustrated. I like it. The tagline on here is Glory Never Gets Old. I believe it's about a bunch of guys in this fantasy world who used to be in their prime, absolutely incredible warriors, but now they're kind of past their prime and they have to get the band back together because one of the guy's daughters has been kidnapped, and so they're getting the band together to go and rescue her. And I believe that's a fairly basic premise, but again, it's a book haul. I haven't read this yet. It's not a wrap up. So that's pretty much all the good info I can give you on this, and I'm really looking forward to reading it. I've seen rave reviews of people reading this series, and I've sampled the audiobook and it seems pretty good as well. So if I get a little bit busy in 2020, then I have a chance to read this on audiobook, which is good. In all honesty, I'm just really excited to read this, and I hope to get to it at the beginning of 2020. But again, all of the books that I want to read, I'm saying that I want to get to in January. So I don't think that is going to be as realistic as I want, but at the same time, I really hope I do get to this very soon, because one, I'd like to get it off my TBR because I'm trying to get my TBR under like 60 or so books, because I got under 150 last year and I did really well. So I'm trying not to haul as many books despite starting the year on a book haul. So again, aiming to get through this as soon as possible because I have heard rave reviews. And then from the same friend, I also got The Papi Wall by R.F. Kuang, and I am really looking forward to this one as well. I actually sent her a wish list, so she knew that these books were books that I really wanted, and I'm really grateful that she got these for me. I only know that this is an adult fantasy, but the main character is a little bit younger and it involves a magical school and the character's name is Rin. That is honestly all I know. It's got a really long synopsis on the back, so I don't want to go ahead and read that out because that would be a little bit boring, but I've heard rave reviews for this series. The second book, The Dragon Republic, is getting even better reviews than the first book, and the first book did pretty damn well. So if that doesn't sing enough praises for the series, then I don't know what will. But that's what was the deciding factor in picking this up, the fact that the second book, even though people couldn't see how it would be continued on after the conclusion of the first book. The second book did something completely different and completely interesting. It sounds like they're going to be really unique, especially because they're an Asian-inspired fantasy, and I usually read like Western or European-inspired fantasy, so I'm looking forward to mixing up my palette a little bit and reading this one. And again, I've heard the audiobook for this is great, so I don't know if I'll read this physically or read this on audiobook, but I'm aiming to read it as soon as possible. And then I lied. I actually have one physical book left, but I've also got one book that I've put on hold left. So I wanted to mention it so that I didn't forget about it. And that is The Last Wish, and it's the first book in the Witcher series. I went to my local bookstore because I got a gift card for Christmas, and obviously they'd all sold out because of the popularity of the Netflix show, which I also loved. So I just missed out. I should have got it a lot earlier, but that didn't happen. So I put it on hold at the bookstore. It hasn't come in yet. So I assume that whenever I get it, I'll bring it home. I'll read it. It'll appear in a vlog somewhere or another on my channel. So you will see it eventually, but for now I'll just put the cover in here so you know actually what the cover that's not the movie cover looks like, and that's the edition I want. But if I get the Netflix cover, not the movie cover, the Netflix cover, if I get that cover, I don't really mind because I think the characters are really, really cool. I haven't really associated them with many other franchises and they just look like the characters are supposed to be. So I'll probably imagine those when I read the book. So I'm not too fussed about getting the Netflix cover or the original cover, to be honest. And then lastly, my friend Sarah was so generous for Christmas. I honestly still can't believe that I'm holding this in my hands, but it is Percy Jackson and the Greek heroes. And these are a bunch of Greek heroes from the myths that we all know, and they are told in Rick Riordan's character's voice, so they're told in Percy Jackson's voice, and I think that's going to make these stories pretty damn hilarious and pretty awesome to read. So again, I am super stoked to have this. I think this is going to be such a fun romp to read, and this book is so beautiful, but I don't know where it's going to fit because it is also so big. Oh, and also look at how beautiful these end papers are, because holy crap. This book has a ton of illustrations throughout it as well, and I'm really excited to read through and discover those as well. It's got all of the myths that are relevant to the stories in here on the back. So it includes Perseus, Psyche, Pantheon, Otrera, Daedalus, Theseus, Atalanta, Bellerophon, Cyrene, Orpheus, Hercules, and Jason. So these are all of the heroes that are talked about in here. I am super stoked. And there you go, that is my start of year / end of year for December and November book haul. I obviously am not going to lift all of these up because I know that I won't be able to do that, and I'm going to drop them everywhere, so that's not going to happen. But thank you so much for watching this video. If you have hauled any of these, if you've read any of them and you want me to start with one or the other, let me know in the comments. I'd love to chat to you, but thank you so much for watching this video, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye.